You're listening to the Studio Success Formula podcast, episode number 9.
Welcome to the Studio Success Formula podcast, the business school for dance studio owners. And now for your host, Clint Salter.
Hi dance studio owners, it's Clint Salter here from Studio Success Formula, and thanks for joining us on today's podcast. Today, it's time to talk publicity. And as studio owners, it's so important that your business is getting exposure in the media for all the right reasons. And today I'm excited to be speaking with a guru when it comes to generating free publicity for your business. Today, my guest is Sue Papadoulis. Welcome, Sue.
Hey Clint, thanks so much for having me along. Looking forward to sharing some media secrets with your studio owners.
Yes, very much so. So Sue is the founder of Publicity For Profit. Sue worked as a journalist and news editor for 10 years in busy radio and television newsrooms in Australia and London, which has given her insider knowledge about how the media works and what journalists want. After moving on from this career, Sue had a family and then started her own PR agency. After generating millions of dollars in publicity for her clients, she still wanted more and made the decision to start helping small business owners so that they could generate publicity for their business. That's why we've got Sue on the show today. She knows her stuff and is going to share with us her secrets to securing publicity for your studio. So, Sue, let's get started. Let's start at the ground level. What exactly is publicity and how does it differ to advertising?
Okay, yes. So there's a world of difference, I guess. It's not advertising to start with. There's not you spending money on an ad. There's no money changing hands to get a story about you and or your business on TV, radio, newspapers, magazines, online news or blogs. So it's basically a process of identifying a story, first and foremost, about you and or your business, contacting a journalist to tell them about your story, and the easiest way to do that is through a press release. And once you've done that, it's then a case of understanding how to position your message so you get new leads into your business as a result of that story appearing on a program like maybe The Project or Today Tonight or Sunrise, or in your capital city newspaper, or on a radio program, or on a magazine, or on a blog or an online news outlet. And one of the things we teach our students is how to go about that so you actually get leads back into your business and you make profit as a result of being in the media. So yes, you can have a story about yourself in a newspaper, for example, and you may or may not get clients, but what we teach is really about positioning your message effectively so that you do get people from the who've seen that story want to come and do business with you, want to become your client. So the end result of all of that is that you make profit from your publicity, as opposed to what I hear a lot from people is the idea that you get your story out into the media and you might get something called brand awareness, which I think is not particularly valuable when you're a small business owner. It's good for big business, but for small business we need bums on seats and dollars in the door, so it's more about making money as a result. So, and I see some people, small business owners, get caught out sometimes by the media offering what seems to be a good deal in that they have to buy an ad in order to get a free editorial. And so you might have been called up by an advertising person offering that deal. Sounds like a really good opportunity, but what happens is that usually results in what's called an advertorial, which is, an editorial which is actually a paid-for space, so it's a story that someone's paid for. And you know yourself when you read one of those stories that it kind of doesn't, you get partway through and you think, hang on, this sounds a bit like an ad. And as soon as you start thinking this sounds a bit like an ad, you're not believing it. You're thinking that someone spent money on it, so it loses that credibility factor. And the reason it sounds a bit like an ad is because the advertising person will go to the journalist, and I know this because I was a journalist and this happened to me many times. So the advertising person would come to me and say, hey, this person's bought an ad and therefore you have to, and I promised them a story, so you have to write a story. Now, as a journalist, I get quite annoyed about that because my stories aren't for sale and it should be a standalone story on its merits, not because someone's paid for an ad. So I end up doing the story, but I don't do a very good job because I'm annoyed about that. So I might get copy from someone's website or from the business owner's brochure, And those words sound like promotion. They don't sound like a news story. And that's why it has that sense from the audience perspective of it's not really a story, it's actually a glorified ad. So there's a vast difference between publicity and advertising. I guess the key thing is that publicity, stories about your business in the media have great credibility. People believe stories in the media. And if you've been in the media, then people believe you to be good at what you do. If you run an ad, people believe that you've managed to pay for an ad. And that's really what it comes down to, the vast difference between those two things.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. And we're going to dig, you said a lot of awesome things in that little part. So we're going to dig a lot deeper into some of those things as we go through the show today. So you've been working with a number of small business owners who want to generate publicity for their business. What are the biggest mistakes that you've seen with business owners, and what the mistakes that they make when they approach the media?
Okay, I think the number one mistake, and this is probably the biggest thing I could ever teach anyone about getting publicity, and it's a tip I'm happy to give you in this podcast. It's what's the basis of some of our longer courses. This is really the key thing that I get across in some of our longer courses, and that the biggest mistake I see, and I even see this with PR firms representing clients make this mistake all the time, and that is you go to make an announcement about your business and your stuff. So it's a very different approach than, say, marketing or advertising. So when you're marketing, when you're spending money on ads, or you're got a Facebook page, or whatever you're doing from a marketing perspective, a lot of it is about you and your stuff. So your programs, what you have to put out there, stuff about you, and that is not what is interesting to the media in the slightest. So if you start going down the path of thinking, I'm going to talk about me, I'm going to make an announcement about me and what I've done, just know that you're on the wrong path. What you really need to do is to be talking about how you help the audience in some way. And if you go down the path of making an announcement and talking about you, a journalist will quickly twig that this sounds like a big fat promotion for you and your business, and they're not in the business of promoting anyone. They're in the business of writing interesting stories that interest their audience. So you have to have the right approach and the right attitude, and that needs to be centred on helping the journalist and their audience. So, some of the mistakes I see if you're not doing that is you're not thinking about matching your market, your target market, to the media's target market. So, for example, if you are a dance studio owner and your target market is kids, maybe you're running kids dance classes and you're sending your information to a retirement magazine, then there's a total disconnect.
Yes.
There's no interest in that story. And we kind of laugh about that because it seems so obvious, but as a journalist, I would get hundreds of press releases from people who did exactly that. They'd send me stuff that was so off the mark for my target market. So you've got to be thinking about, where's the journalist at and where's their audience at? And is this thing that I'm going to send to the journalist actually going to be good enough to get their audience to buy the newspaper, or to tune into the radio program, or to watch the TV show, or to click on the article on the blog, whatever it is? Your job is to make sure that you actually drive people to want to read or watch or listen to that thing. And if it's not, then you probably made the first mistake, which is talking about you and yourself. Then there's a whole lot of other things, like I see a lot of people worrying about things that aren't necessary, like not having great writing skills. I think a lot of people go, I could never be in the media because I can't write. I can't write a press release. Well, the good news is you don't have to have great writing skills. If you can follow a template, you can easily create a press release. And you're not supposed to write the whole story for the journalist. That's not your job. Your job is just to communicate an idea in the format of a press release. And again, a template is very, very, very easy to follow. A lot of people worry that they need contacts. You have to have contacts in the media. And that's another furphy put out there by PR firms to make you feel like you have to spend money with them and be charged a whole lot of money to have a PR person do your PR for you. You don't need to have any contacts at all. You don't need to have know journalists or spend time on building relationships, because journalists live and die by a story. Relationships are useful, but they're secondary. So the key thing that a journalist lives and dies by is a good story. So if you have a good story, you'll have all the contacts that you need. They'll come to you. A lot of people worry that they have to have their website perfect, and that we couldn't reach out to the media yet because we haven't got everything set up beautifully on our website. Again, a journalist doesn't care about your website in the slightest, as long as you've got a vaguely professional-looking page somewhere. And often, Facebook pages are completely taking the place of a website anyway. So I wouldn't be too worried about. Or certainly don't stop. Don't say, well, I can't do anything until my website's finished, because that might take, goodness knows how long, months and months. Yep. And also I see a lot of people worried that they don't have stories, like, there's no stories in my business, so I can't reach out to the media because, there's really nothing interesting about me. The fact is that every single business, there's hundreds of stories in their business, and it's just a case of identifying what those stories are. And it's not about your stuff. So it's not about your programs. It's not about the fact that you've won an award. It's not about that you've just moved office or that you've launched a new website or any of the stuff that you might think is worthy of sending a press release about. That's not what is interesting. But, you have loads of stuff in your business right now that you could be reaching out to the media about.
Excellent. And that leads us on to the question, there's so many stories within our businesses. And, the thing that we hear at Studio Success Formula with our dance studio owners is they always say, but where are our stories? How do we stand out from every other studio that's out there? And so what advice would you give to them about, creating that juicy content, getting those great stories that the media are going to pick up?
Yeah, sure. And look, I think what you said then is interesting, because I think that kind of idea that we've got to create this really mind-blowing, amazing story angle that no one's seen before and is earth-shattering stops people from doing it. Exactly. Because we think we have to have something, sensational. If you start looking at a newspaper or a magazine, or switch the radio on, or watch a program like Today Tonight or Sunrise, you'll find that a lot of the content on there is just useful pieces of advice. So when you look at like the daily newspaper, for example, you'll see there's a whole lot of stories that are kind of the big stories of the day. So whatever's happened in your neck of the woods, whether it's a crime story or a political story, or Chappelle Corby being released from prison, or whatever that is, there's those stories, and that is not us. Okay, that's not small business owners. Those stories are there because they're shocking to people, but what we're providing the audience is useful pieces of advice. Now, I know the media is very focused on doing this, on providing useful pieces of advice to their audience, and they're so focused on doing this that they actually run focus groups, and where they get a small amount of their audience together, and they talk to them about what is it they want from the media. And when I was a journalist, I had this happen many times when focus groups would come in and workshop our news bulletins and tell us what the audience really wanted. And the overwhelming thing that people want from the media, or people are drawn to in the media, is having their problem solved. So when you start noticing that a lot of the stuff in the media is around solving someone's problem and how to do something, then you realise how much stuff you actually have in your business right now that could be turned quite easily into a story. So I guess the first thing is to think about how do you help your clients do whatever you do. So what is it that you do to help your audience? And if we start thinking about fitting in with the kinds of stories we see on a regular basis, there are things that we could tie in with. So the first way I actually teach our students is to tie in with something that's already happening in the news. So if you see there's a story that you could tie yourself into, that there's something that you know about, then that's an easy way to quickly jump on that and send your press release to that journalist who's written that story, and see if you can be the person that they quote in that follow-up story. So in terms of dancing and dance studios, a good example of that is something like So You Think You Can Dance, the TV show. So that happens, I don't know how often it comes out, but once a year or twice a year or whatever, and that generates a lot of publicity in other types of media. So the station that it's on talks about it, and they'll talk about it in some of their programs, their lifestyle programs. There'll be radio interviews about it. There'll be people talking about that. There'll be stories about it in the newspaper and so forth. So if you watch that program and there's something controversial that happens, or you have a strong opinion about the fact that those kinds of programs are ridiculous and they don't work, or alternatively they're sensational for the dance industry or whatever, there's nothing stopping you from sending a press release out maybe to your local talkback radio station like 2UE in Sydney or 4BC in Brisbane or 3AW in Melbourne or wherever you are, and talking about that, because the media loves to talk about other things in the media. So there's one quick way that you could come up with a story. There's also things like seasonality, so tying into seasons. There's always stories about winter, spring, summer, autumn, and how you can fit dance into that. So it might be things like how to get fit this winter using dance classes, or how to avoid winter blues with dance, the feel-good factor of dancing. Or if you're looking at summer, then how dance can help you lose 5 kilos in the lead up to summer. Or if you're looking at something like Valentine's Day that's often in the media, you could have something like dance classes or dance classes beat bars as the best place to pick up on Valentine's Day, or something like that. So if you start thinking about what is it that you do that helps people in some way, and how then can you tie in with things that are top of mind, then you start to get the hang of seeing how many stories there are in your business. And also, just on that, you might look at your different target markets. So you might have a dance studio that is focused on kids, or you might have a dance studio that's focused on women or men, or it might be all three, or whatever else. You might have old age classes, I don't know, whatever that is for you. Then you'd have different press releases talking to those target markets. So your press release about kids' dance classes would be a different kind of story, the benefits for skill development, coordination, that kind of stuff, and you might send it to parenting magazines and women's blogs, for example. If you're focusing on the women's thing, you might talk about how you can meet, good quality men at dance classes, you can lose 5 kilos or whatever, and it's a different message for men, and then you would send it to the media that meets those target markets. So I hope I haven't gone on too long there, but basically there is a gazillion story ideas within everyone's business.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Sue, and so many really great examples. We actually worked with one of our clients who is a Latin dance company who did something quite similar for the Valentine's Day. Which was fantastic, because a lot of people, we surveyed their members to get stats around, who's actually meeting, who's actually met other single people at dance class. And so they put some statistics out around that. And the owner actually met her wife as being a student. So that was an interesting angle as well.
Great. And so did they do a survey of their audience?
Yeah, that's right. So they did a survey. So, stats are obviously another great way to get some pickup from the media, some interest.
Yeah, I'm always telling people to survey their databases. So if you have a database of, say, more than 100 people, then there's no reason why you couldn't send them a quick email survey and ask some questions with the end result in mind. So if you're thinking, right, this is going to be a Valentine's Day story, I'm going to ask questions that are skewed towards that topic. If you already know that you think that the result's going to be this and you just need validation of it, then ask the right kinds of questions to get the right kind of answers. And the beauty about doing that is then it becomes very much your own story. So if a journalist likes the story, they can't go off and interview some other dance instructor on that story, because it's your story. You have got those results from your survey, so it's very much a case of it being your story. When I was a journalist, if there was a survey going on an interesting topic, we would always cover it. I remember one survey, it sticks out in my mind actually, is one survey that we always covered every year, and that was Ansell, the condom manufacturer, would always, and I think they still do it now, an annual survey of people's sex lives. So, how many times a week are you having sex? Who are you having sex with? Are you having affairs? Is someone in the office? All kinds of juicy details that people love to know. And they get the great publicity because it's their survey. So Ansell, his name is all over that story, and the Ansell, marketing manager's the person quoted, and it gives them sensational publicity every single year.
Yeah. Excellent example. So, speaking of media, what are your tips for identifying the right people to speak with when it comes to getting your media release into the right hands?
Okay, so the first thing to do is to know where you want to be and get familiar with that outlet. So if you really want to be on Talkback Radio, or you really want to be on Sunrise, or you really want to be in a particular magazine or blog or whatever that is, start noticing what goes on, what kind of stories are being written or produced, start noticing who's doing the stories, start a little spreadsheet of the names of people, of journalists' names and so forth. And then if you see a story that's exactly like your kind of story and it's written by a certain person, it's as easy as, and this is what shocks most people, and I think we kind of always try and make things far too difficult for ourselves, is we just ring reception and we ask for the person's email address.
we love those gatekeepers that answer those phone calls.
It's really not that hard though, because I think people are intimidated by the media to start with, so it feels like it's going to be a bit of a daunting prospect. And you know what? I think it's this kind of reputation that the PR firms have generated to keep you away from trying to do this yourself. That it's going to be hard, and that you have to know the right people. And when honestly, journalists live and die by stories. So they are more than happy for you to send them a story idea, because there are many, many days when a journalist doesn't have enough stories to fill the space they have to fill. And they would love to be receiving the right kind of press releases for their target market. Yes, they do get a whole lot of stuff that's not interesting, but you know, if you're sending your story to the right target market with a story that's helping the audience, you'll so easily be above the 300 other press releases they've got that day. And honestly, you know, the number of times I've had that people ask me that question, oh, how do I get contacts? It's going to be so hard. I always tell people you only probably need 5 to 10 media contacts in Australia, across the country, to get sensational publicity. You don't need a list of 3,000 journalists. You'll get much better results honing in on the particular program or outlet or newspaper or whatever you want to be in, working out by looking at it, reading it, and noticing the stories, who does the story, and then ring reception and say, I've got a press release that suits your target market. Could I please have the email address for Joe Blogs? And 9 times out of 10, they will give it to you, and they'll probably give you their mobile number as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing, and you've touched on a really great point there around the fear. You know,
yes.
fear kicks in and people go, well, I just won't bother. You know, I just won't do it because they won't give me those details anyway, or they won't like our story. But, you know, I always say if you never ask, the answer's always no.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, yeah, I do see a lot of people get that intimidation factor. I think the fear comes from the unknown. I think a lot of people have no clue how to do this. So as soon as I give them some tips and some advice, they're feeling much more confident. And, you know, when I tell them that there are journalists out there who would love to hear from you right now, then that's a big part of that fear factor gone. And the fact there's also a lot of competition between journalists. So they really are looking for stories on a daily basis, you know, every hour for some journalists. So they have an awful lot of space to fill. They have a lot of competition with other journalists, and the way they foster their career is by great stories. So if you can send them great stories, they will start loving you for it, and they'll start noticing you send your press release, and they'll open it straight away.
Yeah, fantastic. And I also say, you know, LinkedIn's everyone's best friend now as well. Lots of journalists are on LinkedIn.
Absolutely, yeah, totally.
Know,
and so journalists are searching for experts on LinkedIn. So they would put in the keywords for whatever your industry is, and then probably expert after that. So if you can optimise your LinkedIn page to have those kinds of keywords and calling yourself an expert in the field, you may end up finding that a journalist will contact you because they've found you on social media. So yeah, really, really worthwhile. And if you were to search on LinkedIn for, you know, the producer of whatever program that you're wanting to be on, you know, there's a good chance that that person will pop up too.
Yeah, exactly. And it's always easy to find email formats and different bits and pieces for organisations as well.
Yeah.
You know, a media release, you've mentioned it quite a few times. It's a great way to get the attention of the media. And I'm sure you've seen some awesome media releases and some not so great media releases over your time. What's the difference, do you think, between an average versus an awesome media release?
Yeah, well, there's a vast difference, and I think it comes back to the first thing I talked about in terms of finding that right story idea is, so we're not talking about ourselves, we're not launching it into a whole, you know, big essay about who we are and what we've done. We just go straight in with how we're helping the audience in some way. So obviously a journalist does get a lot of press releases, and sometimes that can be hundreds of press releases a day, but I'd say 90% of them are written the wrong way. So they are written about about someone announcing something about their thing, and those kind of press releases just get deleted pretty quickly. But if you're focused in on helping the audience in some way, then that will jump out. I guess you need to. There's a couple of basic things around writing a press release. It's written in the third person, so you're writing about yourself as if you're someone else. So it's not in the first person, it's in the third person. The two key things you need to have are a compelling headline and a compelling opening line. So the headline is very much like a newspaper headline in that it kind of sums up the whole story in a couple of words. So it's not, you don't have to be creative or cute or, you don't have to think you have to stand out with the headline. You just have to get your message across. Because what happens is a journalist will look at your headline, and if they like the headline, they'll read the opening line, and if they like the rest of it, they'll skim read the rest of it. So you're never going to get them to read the whole thing straight away because they're so busy. Those two key things are really important. So it's also not too long, not too wordy, not too professional sounding. So I get a lot of people who have this writing block. And it's a really common thing. People go, oh, I can't write. And when you start thinking I'm going to write a press release, there's that critical voice that pops into your head that starts saying things like you are no good, you cannot write, who do you think you are, you need to sound better than that, you need to put in as many big words as you can so you sound more intelligent. That happens all the time. So you need to kind of clear that out and just think that you need to be you. The easiest thing to know about writing a press release is to make it conversational and sound like you, because a journalist is wanting you to connect with their audience, and the only way you can connect with an audience is to be 100% authentically you, not trying to be someone you're not.
Yeah, exactly. And Sue, would you suggest if people are really struggling with their words, do you say to people, look, you should look at getting a copywriter to have a look at what you've written?
No, I don't, because a copywriter comes usually from a marketing background, and so it's a different style of writing and it's a different focus. So a copywriter, by their very nature, goes, okay, what do we need to promote? What do we need to get out there? What is the thing that we want to get out there? And that's the wrong approach. Excellent. What I would say is record yourself speaking about the topic. That's the easiest thing I can give. The easiest advice I can give you is, just hit record, start talking about your topic. Pretend, talk to the person next to you if you need to, or pretend you're talking to someone who knows nothing about your topic, and record what you say. And I dare say a large amount of what you say could be turned into a press release.
I love that. That's a really awesome tip. Fantastic. So, planning is obviously a really important part of any business, and especially when it comes to, marketing and publicity. How would you suggest our studios plan their publicity pitches within their overall marketing plan?
Okay, so what we teach our students is you probably ought to do this on a regular basis, and I tend to think a 6-month publicity campaign is the best approach. So what I mean by that is one press release per month for 6 months. And you can do more than that if you want to, but what I tell people is don't contact the same journalist more than once a month with a different idea. So you don't want to kind of become too much of a pest and constantly coming back to the same journalist, but they'll be happy to hear from you once a month. And that gives you a nice little window. You could do it for 12 months if you wanted to, but 6 months, I guess, is like the average and a good place to start. So if you looked at the next 6 months and you thought, right, I'm going to tie in with some seasonal things. I'm going to tie in, with if Christmas is coming up, or if it's Easter, if it's Valentine's Day or whatever, maybe I can put a press release out around those topics. You might tie in with the weather, a weather-related story, or there may be some other interesting things that you want to get out. And if you can make them specific to a month, then that's going to make it your story more newsworthy, and also just gives you a plan to work to, so this is my idea that I'm going to send out for the next 6 months. And then if you do it consistently, if you do it every month for 6 months, then a journalist will start to notice you and will start to look forward to your press releases. So and it might happen straight away. So you might get a journalist who responds straight away to that first press release, or it might take a month or two to get noticed by a big TV show like The Project. But if you consistently send them good ideas, they will start to definitely take notice. And I've had journalists say to me, look, we run your stuff because you consistently send us good ideas, and we want to reward you for that. So when it comes down to choosing my press release or someone else's who they've just heard from for the first time, they'll go with me because I'm the one who consistently sends them good ideas. And if you want to work that into your marketing campaign, then I guess you look at what other things you are doing around that time. So if you're running a special Valentine's Day course, or you're running a special lose weight in the lead up to summer course, then of course you're going to want to put your press release around that topic at around the same time. If you can coordinate it, then that's great. If not, then just work out what ideas you could have for the next 6 months. But you might find that your ideas around story ideas actually drive some of your other marketing. You might see that actually is a worthwhile. Doing those stories is worthwhile. It has a greater meaning because those things are seasonal and topical. So you might find that you could run courses or classes or something that ties in with that.
Yeah, excellent. And you touched on something really important there, which is the persistence piece. If you send out the first media release and they don't bite, and you send out the second and they don't bite, doesn't mean give up.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I always tell people that you should follow up. So you should always follow up with a phone call. I'm always telling our students, don't expect to hear back, and don't also expect the fact that you don't hear back as meaning that they're not interested. So what happens often is that journalists get busy, they get sidetracked, and they might forget that you've sent them the press release. The number of times I've rung a journalist to follow up, and the journalist has said to me, thank you so much for calling. I meant to do that story, but I got caught up with something else. I'm so glad that you reminded me. So you may send a press release out and not hear back and assume the worst, and and we all have a tendency to do that, to slip into negative thinking. They mustn't have, and you start making a little story up in your mind. Well, obviously they didn't like my story because I said this and I did this wrong, and they think I'm probably hopeless, when in fact the journalist might have just got busy and forgotten to get back to you. So you do need to persist, and you do need to follow up. So if you follow up and you find out if they're interested or not, and if they're not interested, you politely get some information as to why they're not interested. That's going to help you tailor your approach for the next time. So you might get a lot of valuable information in that conversation. And they may say, look, we're not interested in this story, but you know what? We'd love a dance story on this topic. Is that something you could do? And then you go, yeah, of course it is. And I can send you a press release on that. And then you're partway down that process.
Yeah, fantastic. Excellent advice yet again. So we're nearly at the end, Sue. Do you have any other tips you'd like to leave our studio owners with?
Look, I just say get out there and have a go. I mean, the whole idea of dancing, there's just so many great stories that you could be getting out there. And I've seen loads of, I've helped a number of dance studio owners myself in the last year or so get sensational publicity. So I'm definitely not works for you guys. So don't wait, jump in, have a go. And don't feel like, you have to have everything set up and perfect before you do reach out to the media. I launched a business myself that was around helping women start their own business. It was a membership website, and I had 0 clients and was just desperate to find a way to get it out there. And I managed to get myself and that website onto a current affair nationally, and within a very short space of time, I'm talking like 2 weeks, we sold $40,000 worth of products, selling a $20 a month membership fee. And so I know firsthand what that experience can do for your business. It can switch it on very quickly. Just get out there. Don't let the fear hold you back. Start now with whatever you have, and don't be afraid. And use it to step up. Use it to step up and play a bigger game.
Yeah, I love it. Go out there and take some action, basically.
Absolutely.
Sue, it's been really great to speak with you. Thank you. You've given some amazing, awesome advice. I've been a big believer in publicity for many, many, many years, back when I even had my dance studio when I was 16. And, we got great publicity then when it was all about newspapers. And obviously the landscape has changed, and there's so many opportunities now offline and online for our businesses to be featured, which I think is fantastic. And so where can listeners find out more details about you and the courses that you offer?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks. They can go to our website, which is publicityforprofit.com.au, and that's FOR in the middle, publicityforprofit.com.au. We have a special report on that website, which is the 5 biggest secrets to getting publicity in the media. And if you download that, there's a code in there that you can access an additional complimentary ticket to one of our live seminars. Or if you just want to go straight to the seminar page, that's the same website, /seminars. We run seminars in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth quite frequently. They're a half-a-day seminar in the morning. So, from those seminars, we see a lot of people taking sensational action, getting themselves into all kinds of media, and we also have longer trainings, which you can find out about that seminar too. So, I'd love to see some dance owners at those seminars and start seeing them in the media.
Yeah, so would I. Thank you, Sue. Look, again, awesome advice. Really appreciate your time, and we look forward to being able to catch up with you again in the near future.
Great. Thanks, Clint.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Studio Success Formula podcast. To take your studio to the next level and beyond, head to StudioSuccessFormula.com.